Hello, welcome back to whatever I am doing today, and I am so sorry for the abysmal upload speed, but this guy took me literally 2 months to paint, and I'm also a busy bee. I am very happy with him though, very proud of all this, and he taught me a lot about galaxy designs and non-metallic metal gold. This little guy is, of course, the Lord of Change from Warhammer Age of Sigmar, so I thought I might as well make him the theme and learn a little bit about his lore. Wanted to just jump right in with the wings, just because they were the only part I actually had a plan for. I primed the whole thing in black and then put a ton of different shades of blues and purples on my wet palette. Then I looked up some reference photos for galaxies and nebulas and literally just started guessing while wet blending things around. I blocked in the initial shapes with my darkest blue and purple and then highlighted them brighter into the centers. So here's my palette for reference to the fact that I have no idea what's going on or what I'm doing. I found this to be a very intense trust the process kind of paint job, and that was honestly very terrifying because I had an idea and I wanted to execute it well without it looking horrid, but I couldn't know if it was good until it was done. My initial shapes of clouds were a little too small, so I added some black to my nebulous midtones and expanded them, trying to make them seem more layered and more like space gas. So about this guy. The Lord of Change is an avatar of the chaos god Tzeentch from Warhammer. They're known as the Eyes of Tzeentch sometimes, so that's a fun coincidence with my channel. They are born out of nightmares, and anyone who looks at them feels their sanity and reason shred, so that's a good place to start. You can see I tried to hand draw in some clouds like I saw in some reference photos, but I later realized those paint jobs were done by an airbrush, so I booed them and went back to doing it my original way. With my grays and blues and purples settled, I drew in some large stars and gave them a couple of lens flares to make them feel important. After counseling with my wife about it, they suggested I give the wing a black wash and redo some of the highlights to layer it, and so I did. I also expanded the sizes of the clouds a little bit more so as to give it a sense of layering that I believe I did not achieve. I reapplied the highlights to bring it back up to brightness, and now it's kind of starting to look like something. I put my big obvious stars back in after fully painting over them, and then using a very, very wet white paint, flicked the rest of the stars into place, slightly spraying my computer monitor with white speckles that still have not come off. And after that grueling hour and a half painting over the course of 3 days done, I get to do it again! To be fair, it's a lot easier the second time because I didn't have to do the black wash because I made the layers so I wanted them to be the first time, so it honestly wasn't really that bad. I did decide to be a little overly extra though and make his right wing have a spiral galaxy in it, so that slowed me down. It took me way too long to understand how a spiral works, so it looks really bad for most of this, but once I got it all done, you barely notice that I can't comprehend basic shapes. I know it looks like we're already moving on from that disgusting Junji Ito nightmare wing, but I promise we'll get back to it in a moment. My original plan was to have both sides of both wings have galaxy designs, but looking at it made me feel more like it should just be the inside, because that's just way cooler. So I looked up what crows look like and kind of just stylized it. They have a sheen to their feathers and a beautiful dark blue color, so I basically upped the contrast in concept and copied them as best as I could. Each feather pretty much had a gradient from black at the base to mid to light blue at the tip. I also ran some black along the inner lining to enhance the shadows, since I wasn't going to be using any gray, so the highlights would be a bit more difficult to show black as shadow and not blue. And this is another incredible example of the rule I tell every new painter: if it looks too bright when you're painting it on, it's perfect. I thought the blue was going to be too overpowering, and it turned out perfect. So the Lords of Change are kind of fate weavers. They are usually acting out incredibly complicated plans and schemes for the will of Tzeentch, and it's also said that their bodies are constantly changing color and shape, so I think the galaxy thing was a good idea. Their role is also to redirect and reshape the course of history in accordance to what the Lord of Change or Tzeentch seems fit, so they're just fucking up everybody's destinies all of the time. I did the same color pattern for the small feathers on his wing shoulders, but just a little less detail. And the edge of the wing at the very top closest to the body was just pure black. I give it one normal highlight with a brighter blue, and then an edge highlight with an even brighter blue. The edge highlight just made me feel a little bit more mystical. Yeah, here's me just fully redoing that spiral part. So the problem with having only one cool idea for a mini is that some other parts kind of tend to suffer. For instance, I'm making his skin gray. That's it. That's all I got for that. I did make the contrast on his scaly bits on his toes really high, though. I wanted to emulate some more crow foot in there, so he's got shiny peats. His legs, back, neck, and randomly around his body also have some small patches of feathers, so I just used my same blues and purples from the nebulas and just vaguely highlighted the individual feathers as mostly blue with some random purples thrown in for variance. And now for the part that took by far the longest time. All these little armor pieces. I wanted to practice more with non-metallic metal, and this was really good practice for when I finally paint Iron Man later on. I based them in a deep brown mixed with black to start with. Joke's on you, I'm not doing the gold yet. I lied. I'm upping the contrast on his skin tone and painting those gross little arm things on the top of his wings because I forgot about them. How does it feel to be so bamboozled? Oh yeah, and the random claws and talons he has are literally just a silver paint darkened with a ton of black, and then I just left them alone because really I didn't care. Okay, we're gonna get into the gold now. Just kidding, it's a different non-metallic metal. I'm doing his sword now first. How could you have fallen for the same trick twice? Is it really obvious that I just didn't want to do the gold, so I just kept pushing it off? Anyway, so yeah, the sword was done the way I usually do them, which is a gradient from super bright to super dark in opposing directions on either side of the sword. Most of the metal was actually really challenging on this guy because he's a servant of Tzeentch, which means everything he has to do has to look twisty and dumb and weird, so it made it really hard to know where the light would logically be reflecting. Just like with everything else I've ever painted though, I guessed and hoped it would work. Okay, I'm actually painting the gold now, I promise. So on top of the base tone, I used XV88, which is honestly a little bit too bright to go immediately into. So onto the future portions of gold, I went from a dark base tone to Rhinox Hide, to XV88 or Scrag Brown, to Averland Sunset, and then very sparingly to Flayed One's Flesh. And this is the exact color tone I'm going to be using for gold forever, until such time as I buy similar brown tones from a different paint company, solely because Citadel's yellows and bright colors aren't my favorite. This is still a large amount of guesswork, but there's also just logic as to where the source of light is, and how you would like the overall piece of armor to look once it's done. There's no shame in painting the entire part and then redoing like 90% of the work. I've done it before and I will do it again. One thing to keep in mind that I did kind of forget about is that when you have multiple parts of metal on the same model, you need to make sure the source of light is coming from the same direction on all of the pieces. You don't want the sun to be on the right side of the model for most of it, and then his left leg thinks the sun is in, like, Russia. The Lord of Change and his minions move through something called Materium or Real Space, which is a fourth dimensional region of space-time which they use to make minor changes to the real world in order to drastically change the timeline, such as like kill this one guy, steal this thing, etc. While the Lord of Change doesn't do a lot of fighting on its own, it is constantly toying with anyone it can get his hands on to fight for it. Even other demons from other Chaos God domains can be fully manipulated by a Lord of Change without them even knowing it. There's an amazing line on the official wiki that I want to read to describe these guys. To confront a Lord of Change is to wander through a fog-shrouded mire of flies, ever unsure that one's actions are correct, one false step away from sinking irrevocably. But if the Lord of Change ever does need to fight, its magical spells are far beyond the comprehension of anybody else on the battlefield. They're considered some of the strongest sorcerers in the entire galaxy, and even if someone manages to go toe-to-toe with it, if it's being beaten, it'll just start fighting like a rabid animal, desperately trying to kill whatever's attacking it. Now with all that chaos out of the way, I went on to his loincloth thing. Based in brown, and then I highlighted it with some desaturated reds and oranges to contrast the blue, but also to make sure it doesn't overpower the model with too many bright colors. I also used these colors on the cover of his book. I was very much not excited for this, but I painted the staff like wrought iron in similar colors to the sword. The reason I'm not excited is because it's a bunch of stupid shapes and curves, and I was trying to make it non-metallic metal. It turned out okay, but I also don't know how I could have done it better. There's a couple little eye thingies in his creepy claw hands on his wings, and I had no clue what to do with them, so I just made a gradient from like a yellowish green to the pupil to blue on the outside and highlighted that. Then I made the eyes black and dotted in some white highlights. Now for his book. I wanted to make it kind of a little astronomy journal, considering the theme I'd done for him already. I started with some dark beiges, then stipple highlighted on some more off-whites, and then some very vague pure white to make weathered pages. I used these same tones for the papers on his loincloth as well. For the burn marks and damages on pages, I glazed over some dark brown and black to add a charred effect. Mostly just because him holding a book full of nothing but words is boring, I drew in a couple of shapes. One page has a diagram of a solar system, which is just a few circles showing orbital patterns and then some brightly colored dots representing a planet, and I also doodled some other things on there. Once the shapes are set down, I scribbled in some words, presumably describing what's on the page. I don't know. The other page is just a small picture of a ringed planet, and in the bottom corner I drew a little constellation. It's also said that when a man looks upon the Lord of Change, his soul is opened up like a book. So I guess this guy's soul just had a lot of planets in it. Oh, I also didn't do the gold on the back of the book, the top of the staff, the tiny charms in the book rosary, or the little bits on the wings, so I started that process. This guy is absolutely bedazzled with little gemstones, so I painted all of them in a red mixed with purple and then highlighted with red and orange. For final touches, I painted the inside of his mouth a purplish-pinkish tone, did the feather pattern on the back of the loincloth, did the black beads on the rosary, and painted his eyes pure white with a little yellow glow made by mixing pure yellow into my skin tone and making multiple highlight layers closer to the eye. And finally, after all this time of painting, writing, editing, and researching, this fucking guy is all done. I'm really happy with him, even though he consumed my life and made my video uploads take a nosedive, but I hope you enjoyed and maybe learned something while you were here, and thanks for watching. Bye!